Hello, I'm Tom Palmer, a children's author, and I'm about to read to you a story that I've written for the National Literacy Trust called Small Steps, which is a story to mark the 2023 Holocaust Memorial Day in January 2023. And we're here with a friend of mine who's very kindly let me come and record me reading this story next to a model of Apollo 11, which is a story which is featured in my, which is the rocket which was featured in my story. So this is chapter 1, and then in 4 other videos I'm going to read chapters 2, 3, 4 and 5. Small Steps, chapter 1. Okay, 40 feet, 30 feet. We held our breath. Watching the screen, we knew that the astronauts were running low on fuel that they needed to land safely. All 5 of us were glued to the small black and white screen in the corner of the living room. Mom, Dad, my younger siblings Miriam and David, and me. July 1969. We were watching the moon landing, the first time people had travelled to the moon, ever. Engine off, 20 feet. I could feel my whole body aching with tension as we studied the grainy images being beamed tens of thousands of miles from the moon to our home, to the room where we normally played board games and did our homework. We tried to make sense of the eerie moon shadows and forbidding craters while listening to every word coming from the TV, presenter and NASA command. Contact light, 10 feet. Not a sound coming from the 5 of us. Then 413 is in. I turned to Dad. Does that mean? Dad nodded and ruffled my hair with his hand. We copy you down, Eagle. That's the control room, Dad explained. Then he held his hand up to silence us because he knew what was coming and he wanted us to hear it. The moment of spectacular, unprecedented history. Neil Armstrong's voice coming to us across tens of thousands of miles from the moon. Houston, oh, tranquility here. The Eagle has landed. And now we breathed out, laughed and grinned at each other. Mum squeezed Dad in the tightest hug, whispering to him something we could not hear. Man on the moon, I croaked. We had done it. I looked around our living room at the brown curtains framing the sunset to the west, the chairs sat in pairs, the framed pictures on the walls. None of this would ever look the same again. And is that your camera, Dad? Dad asked. The pictures we're seeing? Dad nodded. And it's working properly? Miriam asked. Dad smiled. No words, just that cute sideways tilt of his head. And why should he not smile on this day of all days? Because my dad worked for NASA on the moon programme. And if it wasn't for his contribution, we'd not be seeing these pictures of an American spacecraft landing on the moon for the first time in human history. Here's the science bit. The camera that 600 million people were watching these scenes through right now was so complex, it's hard to put into words. Dad designed some of the really important parts that made a camera work, the sensor and the camera tubes. In an environment with such unpredictable changes of light and temperature, it needed scientists with 3 university degrees to create it. My dad was part of this. My dad was part of history. I was 13 when we landed men on the moon. I had just returned from Israel with Mom to celebrate my bat mitzvah. That meant now I was officially an adult. Maybe because of that, or maybe because we were in Israel, or because I was alone with Mom for a few days without the rest of the family, I had begun to ask more questions about her and Dad's lives, to fill in the gaps in what I knew about their childhoods, their teenage years. I knew about Mom. She'd been born in Germany, but fled for England in 1938 because the Nazis were being so dreadful to the Jews. Mum is Jewish. We all are. But I knew less about Dad. Tell me about you and Dad, I pleaded. You don't talk much about it, and he never does, and I'm 13 now. Mum screwed up her face, stared at the sky, then took a deep breath. Dad's name, she told me, was Mir Sosnowicz. He was born in Warsaw in Poland in 1927. His life centred around family and school and games, playing the violin and going to the synagogue with his dad, my grandfather. He had fun playing hide and seek and hopscotch, Mum said. He had a mother and a father, and aunts and uncles, cousins, 2 brothers and a sister. They had big family gatherings to celebrate Shabbat, Hanukkah, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Then I asked, what happened then? I want to tell you what Mum told me that day about my father's childhood. It's important, not just to me, but to you, to all of us. He was 12 and living on Zamenhof Street in Warsaw when Nazi Germany invaded Poland in 1939. Even before the Germans came, there was a lot of hatred and violence towards the Jewish people. But when the Germans invaded, things became worse. German warplanes attacked Warsaw. A powerful bomb fell near Dad's family apartment, creating a great crack that made the building incredibly cold during the Polish winter. The courtyard reeked of burning for weeks. When the German soldiers arrived on the streets, Dad's childhood was over. It was no longer safe for Jewish children to play out. Jews were not allowed to walk on pavements, only in the gutters, Mum told me. There were other rules too. Jews will not go to the park. Jews will not sit on benches. Jews will not ride the trams. Jews will not go to school. Jews cannot use the hospital. And rules for non-Jews: don't buy from Jewish stores. Next, the Germans forced all the Jews to live in one part of the town. Where my father lived, thousands crammed together impossibly. The area became known as the Warsaw Ghetto. Countless more families arrived, having had their homes taken. One of the things I love about our Jewish traditions is that God requires us to show kindness and to offer hospitality to those who need it. I was proud to hear that my father's parents did that, taking in family, friends and even strangers who were forced to live in the ghetto, having lost everything. My grandparents provided for these people as best they could. They also arranged for the special tutor to teach my father and the other children now that no school was allowed. Education meant everything to them. They knew how important it was. But the Germans found out about the secret teacher. One day, as he was teaching, the Nazis burst into their room, beat the teacher and dragged him away. They burned all the books the children were using. That was my father's last day at school. His teacher was never seen again. Now, with all the Jews in one place, the Nazis could control them, and they created more rules. We will make you wear a white armband with a blue Star of David on your arm to show that you are a Jew. We will catch you on the street and force you to shovel snow or to dig graves. We will not pay you, but if you don't work, we will kill you. And people were killed. My father saw them hung and shot and beaten to death in front of his eyes. Others starved. Can you imagine walking home, passing bodies lying in the street? My mother told me all this, and that most of those who remained were crammed inside the Warsaw Ghetto would go on to be killed. So why, you might ask, was my dad still alive? Why did he not die too? I remembered all the things my mother had told me as I sat with my father on the sofa, watching the Eagle lunar module landing, waiting for the astronauts to come out and step on the moon. It was really hard to imagine our dad was still alive and on the sofa next to me. How had he survived and learned how to contribute to a camera that might show the world, the whole world now and forever, a man walking on the moon? As I was sitting there trying to fathom my father's life, his extraordinary achievement, a thought came to me. What if his special camera didn't work and we couldn't watch men on the moon? I took a deep breath. Will it work, Dad? I asked. When they walk on the moon, will your camera work? Small Steps is the story of one of the Windermere children, 300 Holocaust survivors who arrived in the UK after the end of the Second World War. To find out more about the Windermere children, please read After the War, and please also visit www.tompalmer.co.uk after-the-war, where you will find free resources and links created by the Lake District Holocaust Project and UCL Centre for Holocaust Education. Thank you for listening to Chapter 1.